This is where kindness lives, Nextdoor's global podcast, your one-stop shop for all things kind. Here's your host, Jenny Sager.
My guest today is adventurer, avalanche rescuer, and best-selling author of Go Find, My Journey to Find the Lost and Myself. Between hunting for gold in Latin America and training special ops and Navy SEALs, Susan Purvis says she lost her way. And so began her incredible journey through what she calls lostness. But it was a Labrador pup that helped Susan get back on track, and now she's helping others do the same. Susan, it is so great to have you here today. You're joining us from Hawaii. Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha. Can you first tell us what kindness means to you?
What is kindness? What is kindness? Kindness is giving and receiving love with no expectation. So I love to walk through this world and give kindness either through a compliment, a touch, monetary rewards, and expect nothing in return.
Such a great definition. Is there somebody in your life that you feel like has really done that for you?
Really, it's everywhere. I'm in Hawaii, and we're staying next to a beautiful woman, and almost every day there's some sort of kindness. She brings us over a coconut, and they show us how to open the coconut so we can drink the water and crack open the meat. So really, I like to say gifts from the sea, whether you're in the sea or on land, kindness is everywhere as long as you're open to it.
And sometimes it's those little things that make such a big impact, isn't it? Like that simple act of your neighbor bringing you a coconut and having that experience with you of cracking it, opening and drinking it actually is a really beautiful thing when you think about it. But it's, it's a small act of kindness that's really driving that impact.
Yeah, and what's funny is she just came over. She knocked on the door and she said, "Sue, I ordered your book. Will you sign it?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, that was beautiful too." And so there's beautiful people everywhere.
Thankfully, that is true. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book and your amazing career and your path, because at one point in your life, you say that you were actually feeling a bit lost and you called it lostness. Can you explain that and talk about what you were going through at the time and what that term means?
It took me a while to write my book, but the beautiful thing about living in a small town is I was surrounded by a bunch of writers. We had a strong writing community that had been around for 20 years. And when I started writing about lostness, my friend said, "Wait a minute, lostness? You can't use that word." And I'm like, "Yes, I can." And I told her what it is. I was lost as anybody I ever found as being the expert in a search and rescue career with my canine. And what I discovered in the process of writing my book over 8 years is that not only can people get lost on the trail or in the mountains, but people can get lost in a relationship, in their career, in their business, in their health. And I want to say the health is a big one for me. And people have no idea they're lost. It's not like being outside, where you're lost in the woods and you have to call for help. And so I'm very curious about that area now, and I've kind of made it a lifelong passion to become the lost expert.
So how do you, let's take apart both of those things. How do you know if you're feeling lost? What are some signs you can look out for? And then what are some practical tips for dealing with it and kind of breaking that cycle?
Yeah, how do you know you're lost? I start listening to people, and they start to complain or they start to repeat the bad habits or the behavior or the situation they're in. And it's like this broken record. We all know what broken records are like. And I want to stop them because even their story, it's the same story, right? And so they're in this do loop, and they know something's wrong, kind of, but they can't find their way out. So they're in a hole. And, my job, I feel like I listen, but then I start digging them out of the hole. What are some of the, first they have to recognize they're lost. So I often stop them because it's that broken record, and then say, "Okay, are you willing, to acknowledge that you're lost? And then let's come up with a plan to get you out, get unstuck, get unlost."
And what does that look like? Like, how do you get unstuck, at least in the beginning? I know obviously everyone's situation's different, but whether it's, being kind of feeling stuck at work or in a relationship or, something like where you're living, like how do you kind of break that cycle?
Well, that is a tough one because sometimes we don't have choices. Like you go to work every day and you're like, oh, that person, I just can't stand working for my boss anymore. And then you're like, well, then I just say, well, why don't you quit? Move on. Then people are like, well, that's not an option. And I'm like, well, maybe it is. And so why are we stuck with that position? Why do we have to be stuck in that job? Maybe the best thing you could do is just get out of the gerbil wheel and move on. And it's frightening. I think so. It comes back to fear. Fear prevents us from moving out of our comfort zone or having to face the unknown. And we're creatures of habit. We like it easier and to stop an action, admit something, say, yeah, you know what? This isn't my right career. I've got to go do this, live my dream, the one I've been talking about.
And you obviously made that choice. And I'm going to guess you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of fear because you have been doing a job and have been on a career path that is very dangerous to the average person, and you're risking a lot of things. So can you tell us how you got started on that journey and how you ended up in ski patrol and avalanche rescue?
Well, I was in a job. I got a degree in geology, and I went into gold exploration. In the mid-'80s, that was pretty hot. And my husband at the time and I decided to manage a gold exploration project in the Dominican Republic. So I was, talk about fear. I lived in fear down there, just bashing through the woods, living in a Spanish-speaking country with the campesinos. It was the highway between Puerto Rico and Haiti, and there was drug smuggling and people smuggling. And we lived right on the edge of it, and we were targeted as the rich Americans looking for gold. I'm like, I'm going to get kidnapped. And I thought, I'm getting bit by bugs in the jungle. And I'm like, what am I doing? In the meantime, all of my friends are like living their dream, and I'm doing it for money. And, I remember screaming at the moon one night. I'm like, I don't care about money, and I don't care about looking for gold. And I'm like, God, give me a sign, something. And I got to get out of here. And so since we could live anywhere, it was a beautiful thing about the job is if they wanted someone to work down there, they had to accommodate us. We could live anywhere, and I chose the last great Colorado ski town, which was in Crested Butte, Colorado, at 9,500 feet. So I had one foot in the mud in the Dominican Republic and one foot in the snow, and I came alive. And I love using that word. It's like, to your audience, what makes you come alive? And that's where the sweet spot is, and that's what we should be doing. And I thought, I come alive when I'm on my skis. And in the snow, and it's cold and it's challenging, and, really becoming, one of the mountains. And so I said, well, heck, I'm a good skier. I'll try out for ski patrol. It's like the gnarliest ski patrol job in America. And I'm like, I was 5'4", 110 pounds, wearing white pants from the Caribbean. And I'm like, I'm here to get on ski patrol. Okay. And so they're like, all right, little lady, this was in the mid-'90s. When I was in ski patrol school, I learned about an avalanche that had crashed down across the street and buried 3 toddlers. Can you imagine you're on ski vacation in Colorado and your kids are out playing in the snow waiting for the shuttle bus to bring them back to Texas, and at 9 a.m. there's Bluebird Day and a wall of snow comes down and buries your kids.
Oh my gosh.
They're gone like a tsunami.
Crazy.
And everybody rallied, people grabbed pool hooks and, hockey sticks, whatever they had to start probing the snow. Well, I was hearing the story from ski patrollers, and then they said, well, we had a trained avalanche dog, so we brought him over to the scene. And I'm like, oh, wow. It's like the first time I'd heard about avalanche dogs. And I'm like, what'd the dog do? Did the dog find him? And the guy's like, nope, he didn't find him. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's trained. Isn't that the dog's only job? And I kept saying, wait, this story's not over yet. How come that dog didn't find the humans? And his answer he gave me wasn't good enough. And I thought, what if I got a dog and trained trained it to save lives. And in that moment, I vowed to never leave anyone behind.
Oh my gosh.
It was also the same year. I said to my husband, "Till death do us part." Going through life, keeping a promise, and then there's some promises you just can't keep. But I'll tell you right now, I kept the dog promise. We never left anyone behind, and we really rose to the top of our game, and we were the team that law enforcement called for, water, wilderness, avalanche, and homicides.
You've trained everyone from Sherpas to special ops to kind of the best of the best when it comes into going into, dangerous places and hunting for the bad guys. And how do you do that? Like, where do you start? Where do you begin? And what do you see in those people? Because, if you think about, say, special ops as an example, you kind of picture these like really buff, badass people that you'd think they wouldn't struggle in this area. But do you see them actually get there and it's a challenge?
Well, it's funny because my sweetie comes to my classes with me, and he's like in awe of me, not during when I'm with them in day, but when I show up to teach, he's like, "Sue, you have the attention of 20, 6'2", 250-pound gorillas that do this for a living, and they are all looking at you and you have their full attention." And he's like, "I'm in awe at how you do that."
Where Kindness Lives will be back in a moment.
Hey, you know what's really great for earning some extra cash? Nextdoor's for sale and free. Basically, it's where you go on and you can sell things that you have lying around the house. You can even swap them with neighbors, like household appliances, gardening items, pet supplies, furniture. You can really put anything on there. It's really simple. Just look around your house, see what you're not using anymore, and I bet somebody is going to want it in the neighborhood. And guess what? It also keeps waste out of the landfill and helps the environment, which is really, really awesome. And it's so easy to use. Just download the free Nextdoor app or go to nextdoor.com and start turning that trash into treasure right now. You're somebody who obviously loves to give back. I mean, you've been recognized at the congressional level as well. Where did that shift in your life, and why is that important to you?
I would say the shift came from that moment in the Dominican Republic. It's like, I don't really care about money. But at some point we all have to go make money if we want to, follow our dreams, because it costs money to be able to do all this stuff. And then I'm like, well, I got enough right now, so let me follow a passion. And then my passion, which was, starting to teach and to learn, became my profession. Then I got paid for it. And then my profession became my philanthropy. Because then I started going to Nepal and, like you're saying, training the Sherpas. Like, these guys don't even, might not have, an 8th grade education. They can barely speak English, but, they need to be the leaders when they climb Mount Everest. They need to know how their body works. They know how to need to take care of themselves before they can take care of anybody else. And so just little old me, I get to give power back to the people. And that is a huge honor.
And are there things that, regardless of whether you're a Sherpa or you're a business leader, do you, when you think about doing that, like giving that power back and teaching them those qualities of being a leader and kind of fighting through those challenging situations, is there a common thread that you see there? Like, are there certain things that you feel like relates to whatever you're doing?
That's a great question. What is that common thread? And I might even bring it back to you. I think it's the eagerness to learn, and, maybe we're all inherent leaders. So, and I talk about this in the book, we can't always be leading. Sometimes we have to be followers. So, finding that balance, because what I learned with my dog is when I was training my dog, I was pushing my agenda on her, and my dog would put up if she had a middle finger, she'd stick it up at me and say, "I don't think so, lady. I'm not going to do what you say." And so there's this big challenge of alpha and beta. So I think providing space, and this is what we do in our courses, is we teach them, they're followers, and then towards the end of the courses, they become leaders. So there's all these little baby steps, and they might be really good at, navigating, or someone might be very good at breaking trail. And so eventually, by the end of the course, they can put all the little pieces together, the planning, right, and the post follow-up you can't learn it all at once, but you start to put these building blocks together. And that's the start of a great leader, just like how I learned it.
And you mentioned before that you're often teaching, a lot of kind of males. And I'm assuming that when you started out, it was mostly a male-dominated industry as well. How did you navigate through that?
I think I learned to navigate through that with my mama. I had a mama bear. She never had a college education, but man, don't put her in a box. Don't put her in the corner because she is going to fight back. So, and I'm pretty nice, but when people say, no, I don't think so, not you, I'm like, my hackles come up and I'm like, I'll show you. I mean, it's kind of that, I'll show you, watch out. And, then I find other ways. I can't bulldoze through them, so I find ways to go around them. And what I learned in my whole search and rescue career is I was probably, blocked against the little guys. And I learned quickly, I got to go to the top. Mm. Because if I can demonstrate to the leaders, like the sheriff, I don't have to go through the little guys. So I pass that on to people. Go right to the top.
Yeah, good advice. Did you have moments, and is there one specifically that stands out, even if it was just a physical challenge where you just thought, oh my God, I can't do this. Like, this is too hard. Maybe I should be trying something else.
Oh, like probably moments every day. Yeah, like you're driving a snowmobile down the ski hill trying to go do a rescue and you roll your snowmobile. You're like, oh my God, like I should not be doing this, right? Yeah, there's a lot of crawling on your hands and knees and crying. And also like the book writing process. I mean, I was a rookie writer and, I said, I could probably write a book in 4 months, no problem. And, 8 years later. So it's the naivete of it all is kind of an advantage. But once you get into it, anything you do and you want to be good at it, it is a struggle. And so like today we were swimming in the ocean against the current. The current's just ripping. We're like, we're going to turn around and swim. And I'm like, whatever we do, don't quit. Don't quit against the current. So that's a metaphor for life. It's easy to quit. And if you quit, you'll never get to the finish line.
You're listening to Where Kindness Lives, Nextdoor's global podcast. And our guest today is best-selling author Susan Purvis, who's just an all-around badass, I have to say. Susan, you, as we mentioned earlier, spent some time with Sherpas and in some communities all around the world with people that are risking their lives, whether it's, Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Everest. In those areas, community obviously plays such a strong piece there. And I'm sure you've witnessed that with a lot of the work you've done with the mountain guides and the Sherpas. What did you notice about the communities globally? And did you have any takeaways from that you incorporated into your own life?
People always ask me like, where's your favorite place to travel? Because, my fame to claim is, I've been to the hottest, the coldest, and the highest place, Antarctica, Nepal, and Ethiopia. Well, they're my favorite, not so much Antarctica, but my favorite places are the places where you get to live with the villagers. And now, you're a visitor in their world. You get to learn all about their lifestyle. I mean, those moments touch me. And they make me a better human. And they're so giving. They'll give you their last potato. They'll work extra hard to get firewood to give you a hot cup of tea. They're the poorest people on the planet. And you go, wow, those are acts of kindness. Like, I can do better at home.
You mentioned your Labrador pup named Tasha earlier. Where do you start when you're training a dog? And my gosh, I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear your tips on this one. But, there's that old saying of don't work with kids or animals. Like, where do you start with a dog? And how did you find that whole experience in the beginning?
Oh, well, of course, we all, all of us who've had our puppies, it's our true love, right? At the end of the day, we probably love our dogs more than we love our spouses. Oops, did I say that? Probably. But why? Because it's that unconditional love, expecting nothing. They didn't want anything from us. Well, maybe a belly rub and a food scrap. But, I went into dog training very naive. I'm like, oh, I can train a dog. It can't be that hard. If I would have just read the books or hired somebody, all I wanted my dog to do was find human scent. So I really started on her tracking with the nose to the ground to find humans. And her disobedience kind of went to the wayside. I just assumed if I, called my dog, and if she loved me, she'd come, right? Isn't that what your kids do?
Not always.
But, oh, no, my dog had a different agenda. So I had to step after a year of training. My dog handler friends are like, Sue, this dog is unruly. She doesn't listen. You can't be a dog handler if your dog behaves like that. And I'm like, oh, don't say that to me. But there's that line again between freedom and wild and letting the animal make decisions and then that hard discipline. Now, in recreational life, my dog was, rotten, dirty, rotten, stinker, getting in the garbage and, doing anything to get food. But when I put her harness on and told her to go to work, she found everything she went to look for. So tips, I would say teach your dog a very simple thing. It's when to maintain eye contact. And you can read about it, but having that eye contact that's unwavering, and you reward them for the eye contact, because when you call their name, you want your dog to look you in the eyes and hold that stare, and the command follows. I didn't learn that until 6 years into my dog training and my dog career. And I wish I would have learned that when, 3 months in, because that eye contact is, the key to success. They should be able to hold an eye stare for a minute and then tell them to sit or stay. And a perfect example would be you're on a busy road, your dog runs across the road and there's a bunch of traffic and they want to come back to you. But if I say, Tasha, she's going to stop and stare at me. And then when the cars pass, I'll give the command either to come or to stay. So that'll save dogs' lives. Look into it, people, because, we don't want our dogs to get hit.
I want to share a neighbor story with you. This week, it's actually from Melbourne, Australia. We share one from anywhere in the world in each episode, but this week it's actually from Melbourne. And I know that you're someone who's really open to adventure and just new experience every day. So we thought this one was the perfect story for you. So at the end of last year, 2021, neighbors Claire and Arthur of Knoxfield, Victoria in Australia both received a Nextdoor flyer in their mailbox. They both joined Nextdoor, and she did not actually post on Nextdoor at first, but he did. And she replied and said, hey, I think you look a little bit familiar. Do I know you? Well, it turns out that his children took dance lessons from her a few years ago, and they started chatting online, but they hadn't actually met in person yet. They're both divorced. They didn't know that about each other, and they didn't really want to, come off too flirty or anything. And then around Christmas last year, Arthur said, oh, I've got to go. I've got to take my kids back to their moms. And Claire then realized, oh, okay, he's single. So on New Year's Day, she asked him if he'd like to come over and hang out in her backyard because it was really hot out and she had a pool. And the distance from his house to hers was actually only 3 doors down. They lived just 3 doors apart from each other, which they then realized. He then went to her pool and they've been dating ever since. And what Claire says is, forget all the dating apps. The love of your life could literally be just around the corner.
Yes. Hashtag neighbors, love our neighbors. I think, if I look back at all my neighbors I've ever had, they're all still my very best friends. I think we love our neighbors sometimes more than our own families. And we can't live without them. That is such a beautiful story. And I know a lot of women, and some men who are single in their 50s and 60s, and they're searching so hard to find love. And I'm like, I'm going to tell them the story.
Oh my gosh, you should. Well, you know what, Susan? We have had quite a few people. We are not a dating app, but we've had quite a few people find their spouse or partner on Nextdoor who turns out it's the person's living a few minutes away, or even like this one, a few doors down. So definitely, this is all about meaningful connections, and that's super, super, super meaningful.
You know what I want to say, especially when we're like our late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it's like we want a partner and we want them to live 2 or 3 houses down. We don't want them living with us, but if they're pretty close, that's like the perfect combination. I think you can start something else here.
We're going to play what we call the kind carousel with you, where we get to ask you all kinds of questions. Love this. It's one of my favorite things about this podcast because you find out so many great things about everyone that you're talking to. So first question for you. You are very obviously an overachiever who's good at so many different things. What's something you're not good at?
Eating well. Well, I work really hard at it, and I sometimes can't control myself, and I'll overeat and I get so mad at myself. So having more discipline at portion sizes and chewing my food a little bit slower. How about that one? You probably weren't expecting that.
I wasn't, because you're so fit. I was not expecting that one. But then I have to follow it up with a question of then what kind of things do you like to eat that are like, kind of naughty? Like, are you like a cookie person, a candy person, French fries? What is it?
Yeah, probably the French fries, because I just found out I can't have gluten anymore. So like the cookies are out, and probably like chocolate, malted milk balls or chocolate covered almonds.
So good.
Yeah.
You've taught many Labradors over the last few decades. Do you have any pets at home at the moment?
No pets. I live a pretty simple life.
Well, that's probably because you're traveling all the time, which is a good segue to, I'm going to guess I know the answer to this, but what's your favorite place to holiday? What's your favorite vacation spot?
There's no such thing as a vacation. I know nothing about them. I'm here in Hawaii for a month living and writing and getting healthy, and I say I'm resting and digesting. So it's funny, I don't really ever go on holidays. Like my life is just a continuum. Like I'm going to go explore the north end of this island and hang out and watch monk seals and the big turtles. So I don't call it a vacation.
Is there an adventure or somebody in the same space that you're in that you really admire, someone that stands out?
Yes, my sweetie John Harrington, I try to emulate him more and more. He teaches me every hour, every day. He's task oriented. I have ADD. He's super hyper focused. He's accommodating and kind. And so I like to be with him because I get to learn from him all the time.
Well, and if anybody listening does not know who Susan's talking about, she is talking about John Harrington, who's a former NASA astronaut and also was a guest on this podcast. So you can listen to that episode as well. And such a great guy. Well, Susan, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find out more about what you're doing? And do you want to give a plug to your book or anything else you're working on at the moment?
So go find My Journey to Find the Lost and Myself is the memoir I wrote. You can find it, probably at your local bookstore or on Amazon. And my website is my name, SusanPurvis.com, for coaching and for writing or in life.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Susan. We're so jealous of your life. I feel like I need to go live, as you said, somewhere else really soon. If you want to start connecting with neighbors where you live anywhere in the world, just head to nextdoor.com or download the free Nextdoor app in the App Store. Thanks again, Susan, and hope to see you in person somewhere in the world.
Thank you so much.